and ask your questions directly. But I'm just giving everyone a really quick second to join us. I feel like we need a Jeopardy theme song, little do, 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 as we wait. All right, I am going to begin, and I'd like to say hello, Tansy, Anine, and bienvenue. If you're joining us from the first session, thank you for joining us. From that, if you are just starting with us, thank you for being here. We had a really fun time last time, and I'm hopeful that this will continue. So I'm going to introduce myself again. My name is Elisha Dacey. I am the managing editor for Future of Good. And before I introduced our guest today, I'm going to try and say this better than I did the first time around, but I do want to take a moment to recognize that coming to you from Winnipeg in Treaty 1 territory, and we are located on the original lands of the Anishinaabeg, the Innuit, the Anishinaabe, the Dakota Oyate, and Dene peoples, and Manitoba is also the national homeland of the Red River Métis. So before we begin, while this is a discussion, I do ask people to, if they're brave, to come on and ask their question live, and you can do that by raising your hand. If you're unfamiliar, at the bottom of your screen, there's a little button that says React, and you can click on the arrow and raise your hand through that. If you're really shy, you can ask a question through the Q&A, but priority will go to the people who are willing to chat with us directly. Also, when you're asking your question, you have about 60 seconds to ask your question before the system will boot you off. For those of us who ramble, it's very important to know that there will be a cutoff. So try to be succinct because we don't have a lot of time. So I'm going to basically turn this over to Thomas. Thomas Cumberbatch is our guest today, and I will let him talk about who he is and the really cool stuff that Godspeed is doing. Thomas?
Awesome. Hi, everybody. Hope everyone is well. Thank you very much for having me and for showing up today. Just a quick little bit about myself. I am son to Winston and Kathy, two amazing Caribbean immigrants who came to Canada in the 60s. I am husband to Tegan and dad to 4 little lion cubs. Justice, Journey, Io, and Ari, my 4 boys. And if you hear noise, if you hear fighting, scratching, snarling, I'm at home today because I'm my first day of vacation, so I'm not in my studio. They're upstairs, so you probably hear them at some point. I am also the founder and CEO of Godspeed. And Godspeed is a growth strategy and a branding firm that I always say, we really unearth and illuminate the souls of people and brands who are purpose-led. And that's really what we do every day. We have the opportunity to work with amazing individuals and companies to create impacts in the world that are good for all of us. And that's what I do. That's who I am.
Okay, so let me put on my very cynical journalist hat. Can a brand really have a soul? Is that even possible? It's a brand to me is a marketing impact, and it is a way to communicate. How can it have a soul?
That's a great question. I get that question a lot. I get also critiques that I'm crazy a lot. But really, ultimately, it starts with one core belief of ours, and that's brands are individuals and not institutions. When we go to work every day and we're working with other people, what makes our companies real are the fact that individuals are doing the work necessary to create the impacts that we need to create. When the people in a company are not doing well, the company typically is not doing well. And when the people in a company are doing well, you can see and feel that joy in the innovation, in the experiences that you have with them, in the way that it communicates its own ethos and markets itself. Everything starts with people. And that the collective reality that we are, that we are human beings with a soul When you pull all of that together in the context of a brand, then that place, that business, that office, those people, that product will have a soul because it's inherently human at its core.
Hmm.
And that's what we believe. So yes, 100%. I believe that a brand can have a soul. And the same way that a human being can communicate and inspire someone because of who they are inside, the same thing happens with brands. There are people who in order to get someone to take money out of their pocket and buy something and commit to that purchase, they have to feel something. It's not just a need. It's not just about utility. There are people who are, Patagonia fans because they feel that they are connected to the ethos of Patagonia. They exist for the purpose of solving the environmental crisis. So does a lot of the people who buy Patagonia gear, right? So that's the soul.
So So I'm a nonprofit. I work for a nonprofit, Future of Good, and full transparency. We are actually working with Godspeed right now to talk about our soul. And we had a conversation last week. It was, and again, I had my cynical journalist hat on, but it was actually quite mind blowing for me, the way that these two connected, when normally I wouldn't think that they would. So why should a nonprofit pursue this? I mean, we are all so busy. We are all trying to serve our clients. We are all trying to make change in the world. Why is it important to discover what our soul is?
What happens when an individual or a brand is really able to have agency and own its soul and its ethos, its essence, is that you're capable of communicating your value in ways that transcend the mind. It moves from mind to heart when you have the ability to communicate your soul. And for those who are working in not-for-profit, working in cause, doing good work, I think we all understand that the status quo doesn't put our work first. So in order to break through the noise of the status quo, in order to get a seat at the table, it's so important. It is vitally important to uncover your soul so that you can, when you communicate with the general public, they can truly understand the impact of your work. It's the best way to do that. And I tell people all the time, I say people in cause do the best work, but sometimes have the biggest struggle with communicating how important that work is. So when it's put out in the market, like people don't care because it's not cutting through the noise. And what will is when the soul behind the work becomes something that people can not just understand, but something that people can connect to and feel. That's why it's so important. Think about all the stories that you all capture in your work in cause. Think about all the stories of impact that happen. Imagine if those were communicated at the same level as, that Hollywood blockbuster or that big brand that is getting that everyone's going crazy about. Imagine if that you could platform a story in that way, if you can tell the story in that way. You can't do that without really unearthing the soul.
So I'm going to once again encourage people, don't be afraid, raise your hands. It's okay. Thomas is amazing. He doesn't bite. So if you have questions, we really want to know what your questions are. So, or if you are shy, you can ask in the chat, but I do encourage you to not be afraid to ask out loud, so to speak. Okay, so again, it kind of comes down to, why is it important that we, I guess, even find the time for something like this? And it's really difficult. I mean, I don't know how many stories I've done about the lack of resources that nonprofits have, the struggles that they face, trying to advocate for their workers, trying to advocate for their clients. So to me, this can feel, a little bit extra, like this is an esoteric thing that we don't really need to do. And how do you respond when somebody says that to you, like, we just don't have the time to do that?
You know, um, there are certain things in life that don't give us options. And this is one of them, and I'll explain why. It sits at the foundation or the root of all of our work is who are we? What do we exist for? What is our great big dream? These are all things that not only do you need to uncover for yourself as a leader, for your coworkers and teammates, for the people who are the benefactors of your work, your community, the people who fund you, who buy from you, that the story of impact and the story of your essence is what gets what encourages everybody to come on board. It's also the thing that enables you to align with the right people. So if someone says they don't have the time, well, my response would be, that's fine. But if you don't make the time, then you'll continue to stay where you are. And for many, if they stay where they are, then they won't exist very long. So I always see it as something that's existential, which is why asking the question, who am I, is the most important question that any human being on the planet needs to be able to answer. If you can't answer that question with precision, if you can't answer that question with some form of with a profundity and a deep understanding, then you'll constantly be in a place where you're twirling. You know, I was in an entrepreneurs roundtable with BDC a few weeks ago, and they asked a similar question, and I said, I just use this example. You know, my favorite book is the Bible, and there's this story in the Bible where they say, look, the children of Israel were supposed to get to a destination. It should have taken them 3 days. It took them 40 years because they were roaming, as opposed to understanding exactly where they need to go, exactly who they are, and just walking there. A lot of times, what happens when you don't have a handle on your soul, on your purpose, what happens is you roam. So somewhere you could be tomorrow takes you 3 years. And in that span of time, you could actually lose the organization, lose your best people, you know, all those things, lose a lot of money, you know, lose all the time, right? So I would say to that person that you don't have a choice. If you want to get to a certain place, you don't have a choice. It's existential. It sits at the root and the foundation of everything.
First question, Anouk.
Hey there. I could talk for a long time, but I've been forewarned I'll be kicked off after 60 seconds. I wonder, Thomas, if you could tell us about some of the examples of your work. I've been really inspired by some of the stories you told me about Diving Canada and Habitat for Humanity and just really the transformational work that you've done there. Thanks.
Awesome. Awesome. So I'll start with Habitat. So about two or so years ago, maybe a little bit more, they approached us and they said, we have a new initiative and we've been working on this initiative for 2 years. And we've actually done some work in the initiative. And the initiative is called ABH, Advancing Black Homeownership. And they said, we've done some really interesting work, but we don't know how to get people who should be doing this work with us to join us in this work because they didn't know how to explain the work. So they came to us and they said, we need to build a brand for this work. We need to crystallize the ethos of this work and the purpose of this work. And when we began working through their identity and building what we call the Soul Guide. The Soul Guide is a book that has everybody's, you know, identity and ethos documented in it. When we started working on that, we realized, wow, they were not lying. There were so many ideas as to who they were floating around their team that they really hadn't come to a place where they had enough clarity to actually make the impact that they needed to. They were able to start creating that impact once we solidified some of these core things and had some of these core conversations. I know someone just asked, I think, Mike, what questions can we ask ourselves to unearth our souls? We'll get into that. Those questions are the ones that we've navigated with them so that they can get there. And next thing you know, what that process did, it actually spurred a creative idea because we realized that the work was so important. We said, well, then we're going to have to find an important way to bring this to market. And we ended up deciding to create an exhibit. The exhibit was supposed to show once in March 2024 in Atlanta. It was so well received at their international AGM in Atlanta that people kept asking us in the exhibit how we could get this to their cities. Long story short, after 4 days, 50 cities requested the exhibit. We had to put a request this exhibit button on the exhibit website that was in the exhibit. And long story short, It's been on tour ever since until today. It was supposed to show once. It's now traveling. I mean, we were at South by Southwest as the showpiece in 2025. You know, we've been all over the place, like many states, all over the place. We've been at universities. You know, we've been in city halls. The Smithsonian is talking to us about creating a permanent exhibit. It's wild, and that's because we were unable to unearth who they were, and we saw that who they were was so brilliant that it spurred creative ideas that enables this message now to disseminate across across America in their case to the right people. So that's an example of some of the work that we do.
That's insane. Molly has a question. Molly?
Hi, Molly.
Hello. Thanks for sharing that example. It's good to hear more about how your work functions, I guess. My question is really similar to Brienne's from the chat about leveraging a story or a description of your work for different audiences. I think we're getting really caught up in trying to formulate things for the right audience. And then related to that is like different audiences understand different language, and it kind of relates to our conversation that we had just before this, that like we want to be using the right language, but sometimes that means that the sentence gets like really long because there's these really like complex terms, and then it's not approachable for the different audiences. So that's my question, I guess.
That's a tough question. I like it, Molly. Here's what I'd say to this. We can't expect one piece of storytelling to achieve all of our goals. So this is what I would say. I think what we need to do is identify what we want the conversation that we want that story to start. So I'll give you an example. You have two different people that you're creating the story for. For one, it's a funding goal. You want them to fund you. For another, you want them to be a part of the movement that you're involved in. Well, what we can do is create one story that communicates the soul and the purpose and the impact and the value of the work in such ways that it touches people in general, a human being. The call to action is what can change at the end of that story. And we do this ourselves, where you have one base story, but then the call to action changes for the different audiences. And you know, for one, it would be if this is the type of impact that you are trying to create, or I know this is the type of impact that you're trying to create, and this is an excellent vehicle for said impact, we'd love to connect with you so we can talk about ways that your organization can partner with us from a funding perspective. And then for the other person, it could be, we know that these are the types of impacts that give you life, that resonate with you. This is how you can join the movement. This is how you can become a part of this with me. One story, two different calls to actions. And depending on how the story is, like the medium for the story, whether it's written, whether it's video, whether it's graphic, whether it's a presentation, you can change the call to actions for those different uses. But the key is not to expect one piece of communication to solve all the challenges unless you design it that way. And that goes back to the beginning process. When we are working on film pieces or any type of pieces with clients, we would actually determine that at the beginning and say, okay, we actually have 5 audiences for this one piece of content. How are we going to communicate our call to action within this one piece of content for those 5 audiences? And that happens on things like landing pages. It happens in places where you know many people are going to be there. So it's not uncommon either. But I always encourage people to create different pieces of media for different audiences so you can alter the calls to action. Hopefully that helps, Molly.
All right, Steve, you've had your hand up for a while. What's your question, Steve?
Thomas, I'm excited. I think you and I have met and I've seen your work. As you can see, I'm a marketer, right? Terry Fox, 45 years.
I see that.
So I've written the question because I've been told I'm long-winded and I'm going to get zapped in 59 seconds. I'm going to give you the question and then I'll give you some context. How do we convince board members or funders of the importance of branding? So right now, as a serial volunteer, I'm working on 3 organizations, 35, 28, and 3-year history. And I could preach the story because I've been trained by Clarissa Arthur that you and I know, right?
That's right.
And you're training me now, and Future of Good is also. So what I'm asking for is money. I'm going to leverage it. I'm going to pilot a project, then I'm going to scale it. So I have to write 3 emails that are going to be compelling enough for really busy people to see me. So that's door 1. And I don't go through the gatekeeper, I'm going directly to the source. Now, what am I and the 2 people that are with me going to say to that leader to convince him to give us that money and support us?
And the money is for branding, or the money?
Oh, no, the money. So if they had the branding, we could have done all of this, but the causes are great, right? Terry Fox 45 years ago didn't know what he would do, but today he has a guy who's raised money for him and is wearing his t-shirt. So these organizations need money and they need the support of leaders. So I'm an ambassador because I could tell the Uville story. I've been to 30 graduations, right? I've seen the amputees. So it's a tough question, and you do it well because you convince the decision makers. What I want to do is convince boards and funders.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
I think we've got the gist of the question, Thomas. How do we
Sorry about
convince
that.
boards
Too
and
much.
funders for
Okay.
talking for doing these kinds of exercises and ultimately getting the money in our hands?
This is a fabulous question. The first thing I would say, well, it's a question for you that you may not be able to answer right now, but is, do you understand what those leaders want? Anytime I walk into someone's office, I either understand exactly what that decision maker wants, what success looks like to them, or I don't understand, and I make my entire purpose in that conversation about understanding what in the world they want. And I'll tell you this, if you can, I'm going to assume that you know what success looks like for these leaders, what value looks like for these leaders. I think that most decision makers and most leaders are looking for someone to help them to achieve a vision or to get there. If you explain to them, almost like you said to me just now, Terry Fox has been gone for 45 years, but you're wearing the t-shirt and you're still raising money. You explain to them that you want to do that for this leader. And that when people deeply understand who they are, what they're trying to achieve, what the cause is, what the impact is, and what the legacy is, when you explain that, when people understand those things, that they become ambassadors and literally become that leader's team when they're asleep, then what happens is they start to say, well, how can you help me? Now I'm interested. If you're saying that you're going to get a herd of people together who are excited about pushing what I care about forward, that's when they start to listen. And I always tell people that the word creativity starts with the letter U. And they're like, Thomas, you left school too early. You don't know how to spell. And I say creativity starts with understanding. And if you can get to a point where you have a deep understanding of what they want, and you explain to them that your work, that the money that they're going to give you will then create the projects necessary so that you can scale their impact, that's when they go, yes, sign me up. I'm in. I don't know if that makes sense to you.
Thanks, Thomas. Makes sense to me. Haley, please.
Hi, Thomas.
Hey,
Nice
how's it
to see
going?
you.
Nice to see you too.
Great responses. So one question that I have for you is, when developing the brand soul, how important is it to highlight the people behind the brand and center members of the team, the board, the volunteers, ambassadors as thought leaders on the mission, the impact, and programming of the organization. And kind of the second question with that of, should the brand stand on its own, or should it be built around the influential people connected to the work?
Ooh, that's a great question. I wish I could answer it.
That's a great question. You know, I tell people all the time, well, I tell my team all the time that when I'm in a meeting trying to develop an alignment with a potential client, half of that meeting is me talking about the skill set and the passion and the amazing work of my team. It's one thing to talk about my vision and show them the work we've done for clients. That's also very important. But ultimately speaking, they really, even subconsciously, want to know, how in the world are you going to actually do this for me? Well, it's my team. When you give people in the organization who love the organization, who are passionate about the organization, a platform to share what they know and how they feel, what that always does too is it creates a deeper sense of trust from a brand perspective. Looking from the outside in, I trust you more if there are more people in your storytelling, if each one of those people is impressive, if each one of those people seems as though they really care and they're connected to the mission of this organization, and if those people are able to communicate and convey the purpose of the organization in a way that is in sync with each other, what that shows is that the organization has a strong understanding of its core. I used to do this exercise with people. The moment that people would say, Thomas, you know, we don't need this, or we're too busy, I'd give like a piece of paper or a Post-it like this to the people in the room, and I'd say, don't talk to each other. Write down the vision of this organization. 9.5 times out of 10, there's different things on these Post-its. The problem with that is that if you talk to me, and then you talk to me, and you talk to me, you're telling me something different, then I know that there's a lack of understanding and clarity. And that's what putting your people on display, when they know who the organization is, when they constantly point back to the North Star of the organization, it elicits just such a deep sense of trust for all relevant stakeholders.
So in the chat, Allison has asked, how is purpose different from soul?
That's such a great question. So I always tell people, and this is our belief and philosophy, is that the soul is the central nervous system, or the central repository for all forms of depth and meaning. And it's interesting because that we believe that's where your essence lives, in the soul. And a part of your essence is your purpose. And I'll tell you, we believe that our purpose lives there. When we know, the moment that we know what our purpose is, that enters into a place of deep knowing, and that's the soul. So the soul is like a container, which is why we tell people to find it, and why we tell people that we'll turn the world upside down to help our clients and our community find it. Because once you find the soul, you find everything. Everything's in that magic box. So your purpose, which we spell P-U-R-P-U-S, I know I don't spell well. The U-S really says that a purpose is not a purpose unless it includes others. Your great big dream, your vision, your greatness. And we can talk about that later if we have time, but greatness, we all have our own measure and sense of greatness, and we need to understand what that is, because that fuels our vision, our heart, our soul, our magnanimous mission. Our culture, which we define as values, beliefs, and behaviors. All of these things live inside of the soul. And they come into the soul when we understand what they are. They kind of float around until we understand what they are. Once we understand what they are, then we bring them into our souls, and then we live from that place. That's where we live. We live from our souls. So that's a great question.
We've only got 5 minutes left. So if you want to talk about greatness, now is your chance.
Okay. Greatness is important, and people are afraid of the word greatness because we always define greatness as becoming the leader, or becoming the best at, or becoming the most of. But greatness is an individual thing. Greatness is when you understand your purpose, which answers the question, what am I here for? And achieves the vision the great big vision or the great big dream, which is your vision. What is it that my purpose is engineered to achieve? When you understand those two are like peanut butter and jelly. When you understand your purpose and you have a vision, then the two of those combined give you a good idea of what greatness looks like for you in your context. And that's the thing that we need to push for and achieve every day. I've had great debates with people who say, no, we don't need to try to like strive for greatness. We just need to be. Well, you know what? If you ask somebody, do you want to be a good mom or a great mom? Or a good human being or a great human being? Most of us will in our hearts say, we want to be great at what we do. That's why we're working so hard. Well, that's because greatness is important for human beings. It's very important for human beings because it gives us a reason to continue living and to continue living intentionally as long as we are living. So greatness is very, very important. And I think that's the piece for all of you that I want to say when it comes to building a brand. It's not just about coming up with a nifty tagline. It's about literally defining and articulating the greatness that is you or your organization or your brand or your company. That's what you want to put out in front of people because you want people to also feel great about working with you. That is so important.
Thomas, I want to thank you so much for giving up your valuable vacation time to speak with us. I didn't hear any screams or torture, so I guess the kids are okay. I do hear my cat yelling at me for not opening the door, but I encourage people to connect with Thomas on LinkedIn or find him on his website. And in the meantime, we are going to take a really quick break before our next session. So again, take your time, grab some water, stretch, and we will see you at the next section in just a little while. Thank you again, Thomas, for being here. Appreciate it so much.
Thank you, Elisha. Thank you, folks. Have a wonderful day.
Take care, folks. Bye-bye.